There is a mural on a wall in Georgetown, Penang, that stops people mid-stride. Not because it is large. It is not particularly large. Not because it is in a prominent location. You have to know which back alley to turn into to find it. It stops people because of what it does to the wall it is painted on. The mural shows a boy on a bicycle, leaning into a turn, one leg lifted off the pedal, entirely absorbed in the momentum of the ride. He is painted in extraordinary detail. The tension in his hands on the handlebars, the concentration on his face, the specific weight of a child balancing something that is just barely within his control. He is painted in black and white, and the bicycle he is riding is real. An actual bicycle, mounted to the wall where the painting indicates it should be, so that the two-dimensional boy appears to be riding a three-dimensional bike through a painted world that opens behind him into the faded plaster and peeling paint of a Georgetown shophouse wall. This mural has been photographed by millions of people. It has appeared in travel publications, in photography books, in social media feeds from every continent. It is one of the most reproduced images of any city in Southeast Asia. And the man who painted it arrived in Penang as an unknown Lithuanian artist, completed the work in a matter of days, transformed the way the entire world saw Georgetown, and then moved on to other cities and other walls and other projects. His name is Ernest Zacharevic, and this is his story. Before we begin, subscribe to ensure that you never miss out on any of my videos. With that being said, let's get right in. What does it mean when a single artist changes a city forever? Not a city planner, not a government, not a developer. An individual person with paint and skill and a very specific vision of what a wall in Heritage City could become. Street art is everywhere now. Cities around the world have commissioned murals, created street art districts, turned blank walls into cultural amenities that drive tourism and regeneration. The form has moved from illegal activity to civic institution with remarkable speed. And the vocabulary of street art, the characters, the styles, the specific visual language of public painting has become genuinely global. But before all of that arrived in Penang, before Georgetown became a destination associated with street art, before the Murals Trail became one of the most popular activities for visitors to the city, there was one artist, one commission, and one very specific decision about what to do with the walls of a heritage city that had been slowly losing its living community to gentrification. The story of Ernest Zacharevic and Penang is not simply a story about beautiful art on walls. It is a story about how a city sees itself, about who gets to define what a place looks like, about the difference between art that serves tourism and art that serves the people who live in the place, and about what happens when something genuinely original is created in a public space that then becomes a commodity. It is also, at its most personal, the story of a young artist from a small country in northeastern Europe who ended up in a city in Southeast Asia and made something that outlasted his presence there, that changed the city in ways he may not have intended, and that raises questions about authorship and legacy and the relationship between a work of art and the place it inhabits that are worth taking seriously. Part 1. The Artist. Who is Ernest Zacharevic? Ernest Zacharevic was born in Lithuania. He studied fine art at Loughborough University in England and developed a practice that combined large-scale painting with three-dimensional found objects, a technique where painted figures interact with real elements attached to or existing on the wall surface, creating a visual conversation between the two-dimensional painted world and the three-dimensional physical world. Before Penang, Zacharevic had worked in various cities producing street art and gallery work, developing the specific technical approach that would make his Penang murals so distinctive. The use of real objects, a real bicycle, a real rocking chair, real footwear, integrated with painted figures was not a new concept in street art. But Zacharevic brought to it an extraordinary level of painterly skill, a sensitivity to surface and material, and a genuine talent for character and emotional narrative that distinguished his work from the more stylistically defined work of most urban artists. He arrived in Penang in 2012 at the invitation of the Georgetown Festival, an annual arts festival that was using creative programming to draw attention to the heritage city and to the cultural life that was beginning to re-establish itself in the heritage zone as gentrification pressures simultaneously threatened it. He was 26 years old. He was not famous. He was a promising young artist with a strong portfolio who had been invited to participate in a festival that commissioned work in public spaces. The commission he received was for a series of murals on the walls of heritage buildings in Georgetown. The brief was loose. Paint something that engaged with the heritage and the community of the city, something that used the specific character of the walls and the streets and the buildings as part of the work rather than simply using them as a canvas. Zacharevic took the brief seriously. He walked the streets of Georgetown for days before he painted anything. He paid attention to what was there, the scale of the buildings, the texture of the walls, the way light moved through the narrow streets, the specific quality of decay and history visible in the plaster and paint of 100-year-old shophouse facades. And then he started painting. And what he produced was something that nobody, including, it seems, Zacharevic, had anticipated would have the effect it did.
Part 2. The Murals, What He Painted and Why It Worked. Zacharevic produced 6 major works for the 2012 Georgetown Festival. 5 of them used his signature technique of integrating painted figures with real 3-dimensional objects. All 6 engaged directly with the specific character of their locations, the walls they were painted on, the streets they faced, the community context they existed within. The most famous is Children on a Bicycle, the boy on the bike described in the opening of this video, on Armenian Street, which has become the most photographed mural in Penang and one of the most shared travel images of any city in Southeast Asia. The specific genius of this piece is the integration of the real bicycle into the painted scene, the child painted with such physical specificity and emotional precision that the viewer's eye accepts the real bike as continuous with the painted figure, creating a moment of visual ambiguity where the line between the painted world and the physical world becomes genuinely uncertain. The second most visited is Girl on a Swing, a young girl painted in the same precise black and white style, leaning back on a real swing suspended from the wall of a building on Lebu, Armenian. The swing moves in the wind. The painted girl is entirely still. The combination produces a specific melancholy, the painted child frozen in a moment of joy that the physical movement of the swing around her makes simultaneously present and impossible. The third major work, Big Brother, shows a large painted boy crouching beside 2 real children on tricycles, his expression protective and slightly worried, the scale contrast between the large painted figure and the small real vehicles, creating a visual tension that is both funny and slightly unsettling. The piece was positioned on a wall that, in the context of the street, made the large boy appear to be watching over the neighborhood itself. The fourth work, Little Children on a Bicycle, is a companion piece to the Armenian Street mural, this time showing 2 children on a single bicycle on Chulia Street, the smaller child seated on the handlebars, both painted with the same extraordinary physical specificity that makes Zacharevic's figures so compelling. The wall it was painted on has since been developed, and the mural is no longer visible, a loss that Penang's street art community still discusses. The 5th and 6th works, a boy on a motorbike and a figure reading a book leaning against a wall, are less visited, but show the same technical and emotional intelligence as the more famous pieces. Every mural was positioned with an understanding of how the light in its specific location would interact with the painting at different times of day. Zacharevic understood that a painting on a wall in a heritage city is not a static object viewed under controlled gallery conditions. It changes with the light, with the weather, with the context of the street around it. Every piece he made used this changeability as part of the work. What made the murals work, what made them travel so far and so fast through the world's attention, was not simply that they were skillfully painted. It was that they were honest. They depicted children who looked like the children of Georgetown. They used the specific, weathered, layered walls of the heritage city as material rather than simply as surface. They did not announce themselves or explain themselves. They simply appeared on walls that had previously been blank and created the specific feeling of having discovered something rather than having been shown it. In a media environment saturated with content designed to be shared, they felt genuinely private. And that paradox, private things in public spaces, is what made millions of people want to share them. Part 3. The Transformation. What happened to Penang? The photographs of Zacharevich's murals spread with a speed and a reach that nobody involved in their creation had anticipated. By the end of 2012, Penang's Georgetown was appearing in travel features in publications and on websites that had not previously covered it. By 2013, visitor numbers to the Heritage Zone had increased measurably. By 2014, the Mural Trail, a self-guided walking route connecting the Zacharevich works and the other street art pieces that had been commissioned or appeared in the wake of the original works, was one of the most popular tourist activities in the city. The effect on Penang's cultural identity was immediate and lasting. The city had always been proud of its heritage, its food, its multicultural character. What it had lacked was a visual shorthand, an image that communicated its character to someone who had never been there. The Zacharevich murals provided that shorthand. The boy on the bicycle on Armenian Street became the image of Penang in the way that the Eiffel Tower is the image of Paris, not because it encompasses everything the city is, but because it communicates something essential about the feeling of being there, available in a single glance. What followed was both a boon and a complication.
The attention that the murals brought drove economic activity that the Heritage Zone needed. Cafes opened, boutique hotels opened, tour operators created walking routes. The murals themselves became infrastructure for a new kind of Penang tourism that was younger, more culturally engaged, and more international than the previous visitor profile. But the attention also accelerated the gentrification that was already threatening the living heritage community. The same visitors who came to photograph the murals drove up the commercial value of the Heritage Zone properties. The same economic energy that the murals catalyzed made it harder, not easier, for the traditional businesses and residents to remain in place. The story of Penang being slowly erased that we discussed in an earlier video has Zacharevich's murals as one of its chapters, not as a cause but as an accelerant. The artist painted something beautiful. The market did the rest. Part 4. The Copies and the Crisis. The success of the Zacharevich murals produced an immediate and enormous proliferation of street art in Georgetown. Within years of the original 6 works, hundreds of murals had appeared on walls throughout the Heritage Zone, some commissioned by the city, some by private businesses, some appearing without permission on heritage buildings whose owners may or may not have been consulted. The quality varied enormously. Some of the subsequent murals were made by genuinely talented artists who engaged thoughtfully with the heritage context and produced work of real merit. Many were not. The visual language of the Zacharevich works, children depicted with warmth, real objects integrated with painted figures, was widely imitated with decreasing skill and decreasing connection to the specific community and character of Georgetown. The heritage walls of one of the great UNESCO cities in Asia became, in some areas, crowded with work that used the visual grammar of the original without its substance. The proliferation created a genuine tension between different visions of what Penang's street art should be. For those who understood the Zacharevich works as having derived their power from their specific relationship with the place, the weathered walls, the specific community, the heritage context, the subsequent explosion of imitative and often superficial work felt like a dilution. For those who saw street art primarily as a driver of tourism, any mural was a good mural. For the heritage preservation community, the question of what was appropriate to paint on a UNESCO World Heritage building was more serious than either of those camps acknowledged. The iron sculptures and the steel rod caricatures by other artists that appeared in Georgetown streets, works that used different materials but the same principle of interactive street art, complicated the picture further. Some were genuinely good, some were kitsch. The boundary between street art as cultural expression and street art as tourist amenity became increasingly blurred as the years went on and the commercial infrastructure around the scene expanded. Georgetown is now indisputably a street art destination. Whether that is what it should be, whether the city's identity as a living multicultural heritage community has been enhanced or obscured by its identity as a murals trail, is a question that Penang people answered differently depending on where they sit in relation to the changes the last decade has produced. Part 5. The Artist After Penang. Ernest Zacharevic did not stay in Penang. After the 2012 festival works, he continued to travel and paint in other cities, Hong Kong, Borneo, Johor Bahru, various locations around Southeast Asia and beyond. He developed his practice in new directions, maintained a significant and engaged following for his work, and built a career as one of the more thoughtful and technically accomplished artists working in the street art tradition. He has spoken in interviews about his relationship to the Penang works and to their aftermath in ways that suggest a complicated awareness of what the murals became. He has expressed discomfort with the proliferation of imitative work in Georgetown, with the commodification of the street art scene, with the use of the murals purely as photo opportunities disconnected from the community and context they were made for. He has been clear that the works were made for the city and its people, not for the tourism industry. At the same time, he has not disowned the work or the legacy. He has returned to Penang. He has continued to engage with the city and its creative community. He has made new work in Malaysia. His relationship to what he made in 2012 and to what it became is not one of straightforward pride or straightforward regret, but something more nuanced. The relationship of an artist to a work that escaped the context of its making and became something larger than what was intended. This is one of the defining conditions of public art. Once a work is on a wall in a city, it belongs to the city. The artist made it, the city keeps it. The relationship between the two, the maker and the place, is not one of ownership, but of a specific, ongoing, sometimes uncomfortable conversation between what was intended and what the world made of it. Zacharevic made something for the people of Georgetown. The world turned it into a destination. The city built an economy around it, the artist moved on, the murals remained. All of these things are true simultaneously, and none of them entirely resolves into the others.
Part 6. What the murals are now. The surviving Zacharevic murals in Georgetown today are in various states of preservation. Some have been touched up or restored. Some have weathered in ways that have changed their character, the plaster around them continuing to age, new layers of weathering accumulating, the buildings continuing their decades-long conversation with tropical humidity and salt air. One major mural, the Chulia Street Children on a Bicycle, was lost when the building it was painted on was redeveloped, a fact that produced genuine grief in the Penang community when it happened. The murals that survive are still extraordinary to see in person, not because they are perfectly preserved. They are not, and the imperfect preservation is part of their current meaning, but because they are still, in the way that genuinely good art continues to be, present. They have not become invisible through familiarity. They still stop people. They still produce the specific pause of genuine encounter. Standing in front of the boy on the bicycle on Armiana Street, knowing everything that has happened since it was painted, the tourism economy it helped create, the gentrification it accelerated, the hundreds of imitative murals it inspired, the conversations about heritage and commodification and community that it catalyzed, and looking at the child's face and the specific weight of his hands on the handlebars, you still feel what you were supposed to feel, a child riding a bicycle, joy and concentration and the specific freedom of momentum, something small and human and true. That is what makes Zacharevic's Penang work remarkable and what separates it from the mass of subsequent work that uses the same vocabulary. It was made with genuine skill and genuine care for the specific place and community it was made for. It depicted people who looked like the people of Georgetown on walls that carried the history of Georgetown in a way that said, this place matters, these people matter. This specific, ordinary, beautiful life matters enough to be painted on a wall and given to the city forever. That message has not dated. In a city that is being slowly erased, its heritage community displaced, its traditional businesses replaced, its living culture turned into a performance for visitors, the murals are, paradoxically, one of the most honest documents of what was here. They were made by an outsider who paid enough attention to see what was real, and they have lasted. Ernest Zacharevic arrived in Penang in 2012 as an unknown artist from Lithuania with a commission for 6 murals. He spent weeks walking the streets and days painting the walls. He created something that changed the way the world saw a city, and then he moved on. The murals are still there. The boy on the bicycle is still on Armiana Street. The girl on the swing is still on Lebu Armian. The children are still painted on walls that continue to age and weather and tell the story of a city that is trying to hold on to what it is while the world tries to turn it into something more convenient. What Zacharevic did was not just paint beautiful pictures, he gave a city a way of seeing itself that was true. Not the version of Penang that the tourism industry was beginning to construct, the perfect heritage backdrop for the Instagram feed. The version that existed on the actual walls of the actual streets where actual children actually lived. And in doing that, in the specific, skilled, honest way he did it, he created something that cannot be undone. It is in the walls. It is in the world's image of the city. It is in the conversation about what a place owes its people and what its people owe the place. That is a remarkable thing to have done in 6 walls at 26 years old in 6 days. If this made you want to walk those streets with your eyes properly open, hit the like button, subscribe for more content that goes this deep into the places and the people behind them, and drop a comment below. Have you seen the Zacharevic murals? What did you feel? Tell me. I read everything. See you in the next one.